One of the things that came out this week that I thought was really interesting, Lauren, was there was a recent article in the Atlantic that universities are used to selling college experiences with education as a small part of that. And they're used to selling more of the experience. Well, now we're having to kind of adjust to selling the online market, to selling what our programs are about. So what suggestions do you have for our attendees here about how to really, make some changes as we move forward into this new world of recruiting and hit on the things that we may have not hit on as hard on in the past?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me. I think we've actually known each other for about 7 or 8 years.
Oh
so
boy.
we're dating ourselves. Yeah, so, we were talking earlier about it this week. I think that authenticity is really one of the big things that's missing right now. And so, thinking back to last academic year when, mid-March, everything went remote, we were all kind of holding our breath and thinking that this year it would all go back to normal. So we were still selling that, same college experience. Well, now we're in our second academic year of COVID and it's not back to normal. So I think we need to pivot and make sure that we're truly selling what is authentic to now. So, making sure that students are talking about what it's like to do virtual classes and why virtual classes at your institution are better than at a different institution. And same thing with, social distancing precautions. What is it really like to be a student right now with what's going on? Because we don't know what it's going to be like next year and if it's going to be any different. And, I think another point from that article was saying, it is really difficult to differentiate when you take the experience off the table, because a lot of times, families were making a decision to pay a high dollar based on the city that their student was going to be in or the experience that they were going to have. And so now when you strip that away, all that's left is the education. So you need to make sure that you're selling the education and that, you're really talking about the value of your degree and your faculty and what your students are doing when they graduate.
Yep. Really good points, Lauren. I think, you really hit on a couple of things that, faculty profiles, alumni profiles, really, hitting on the inspiration of what education could do for you in your career as well. We still want to talk about the experience. I know how important that is, but as we transition into this, it might be bringing the experience down a little bit and waving that pendulum a little bit to getting closer to, hitting on academics, hitting on, impact your alumni and your students are making in the world for the greater good, things of that nature that really inspire your audience to connect with you, to understand, is this part of your brand or is this just a one-off thing? So really good stuff from there. As a reminder for everyone, if you have any questions, feel free. It could be anything off, it could be off topic, whatever you all want to talk about. Feel free to shoot those over in the Q&A section as well. Now, one thing that as well that I was thinking about the other day, Lauren, was, truly thinking about how do we differentiate ourselves? How do we talk about things that are different? Like, it can't just come from the admissions office, right? It has to be across the entire institution. So from your experience in your time in admissions, what is that? How does that impact, how does that happen? Number one, but number two, with that being said, what did you see from the impact of you all doing that in a place like LSU?
Right. So, when you make a big change in terms of messaging and, how you're going to sell your institution, that can't just come from the admissions office. It can't just come from central marketing. It needs to be campus wide. Everyone, rowing the boat in the same direction and saying the same thing. Because if a student talks to an admissions representative and they say, oh, the number one reason you should, come to our institution is because of this, and then they talk to a professor in biology and he or she says something different and those are conflicting messages, then you really want to get everybody on the same page so that they're all singing the same tune. And so for us, that took a lot of time, a lot of meetings and hand holdings and explaining why we're going to be doing it this way. And then ultimately over time, people started to see the benefits of all having cohesive messaging campus wide across the board.
Okay, very good. Really good stuff. I had one question from attendee, and it is, how do we better recruit graduate prospects? And so one of the things that I always talk about is when we talk about graduate prospects, we can't just be buying lists like we do in the undergraduate world as much, right? It's a lot of stealth visitors. When we go through any kind of economic downturn, or in this case, a pandemic, we spend a lot more time online. There's a lot of times we're reevaluating, do we really want to continue to do what we're doing here? And so that's why having these experiences that allows prospective students to be able to navigate to what they're looking for is so important. A lot of times the struggle with graduate recruitment is that we don't have a lot of content created. We don't have a lot of things that are out there that we can really sell our story with. So it's about building out your content library, but allowing someone to dive into your content library at their own terms so that they can capture them with one piece of information. It might be that you're sending out a video through social media and it captures their attention, but what's next? So it's always, stealth visitors are going to be a bigger and bigger problem that we run into, not with just undergraduate students, but also graduate students. And we're going to have to be able to capture their attention with the right type of content at the right time and engage them to capture their information so that you all can be the closers. Now, the next question that I want to hit on is, as a marketer, the idea of differentiation makes sense to me, but how can I respond to university partners who think small liberal arts college is a differentiator when a dozen local universities can say the same thing? I think from my standpoint, and I'll turn this over to Felter to give you your answer as well, I think that is definitely a challenge. There's a lot of schools that talk about the same, personal feel of a small college. We have small class sizes, we have personal faculty one-on-one relationships. But what about those relationships? Showing those things. How we differentiate is through your people in that authentic and genuine way. So if we're talking about that, instead of just talking about it, let's show that. Because when we talk about video, we talk about rich media, it allows us to evoke more than just me reading a book. So when I read a book, right, I'm painting this picture in my mind. Well, maybe I painted a palm tree. Well, when Felter read that book, she painted a pine tree. Well, we're not on the same page, right? Because we're all painting this stuff in our imagination. So it's really important to make sure we're highlighting your people as your differentiator. And that's, to me, what we're lacking in this industry this fall and during the pandemic, is we've kind of taken the people out of it because we weren't set up to really leverage that in the digital world. All right.
Yeah, I would say the exact same thing. I think everyone says they have small class sizes, even large institutions. So, I mean, really illustrating that is going to speak volumes, showcase those students and actually let them talk in their own words, unscripted, and say what that means to them and an experience they've had with the professor, opportunities they've had. Let the professors talk about students that they've worked with. That will go a lot further than just a sentence in an email that we have small class sizes and a small community and you're more than a number here.
Really, really good. Yeah, good point. The next question that I think is really interesting, and I've heard this quite a bit in the last 6 months, and I'll handle this one. The next one will go to Lauren, is what best practice can you recommend about how much of pre-pandemic content and imagery is safe to share versus how much should we focus on the post-COVID realities, or do students want to see the photos or hear about what campus experience is like before March? Really, really good question. And I think to answer your questions, a little bit of both. I think it's important to show what campus was like before, but I also think it's a reality to show what it's like now and be authentic and genuine. Now, maybe 6 months from now, when we get out of this whole pandemic, hopefully fingers crossed, right, I'm probably not going to want to think about wearing a mask ever again, right? So we're going to have to be flexible with how we create that content. And it might be that we show masks during the B-roll or something of that nature, or showing master imagery, and then when it's over, we remove it. But being authentic and genuine is going to be really, really important during this time. Do you have anything to add to that, Lauren?
I would just say that I think, maybe hitting on the positive, like students have a lot more free time on their hands. Are any of them doing anything really constructive with that free time? Do students now have an opportunity to have internships that aren't limited by geography like they were before? Maybe your institution is in a small town, and so you previously battled with students all fleeing for the summer so that they could go to big cities for internships. And maybe now they have the opportunity to do those, from their dorm room or from their apartment. So I think, definitely a mix, and then highlighting what are the positives of our current reality.
Okay, really, really good stuff. This next question, I think, is a really good question for you, Lauren. It's, what can we do differently at virtual high school presentations to capture the attention of the students and make them want to apply?
This is something that we were talking about, I think last week. Anything that you can do to be interactive is better than just sitting at a screen and talking. So, maybe that starts out with, at the beginning, you create a poll that says, what kind of information do y'all want to see today? And then you skip to different parts of the presentation based on what they say. Or you break up into breakout rooms and you let them talk to each other for 5 minutes and then you bring them back in. There are a lot of different features within Zoom that I don't think that everyone is particularly utilizing. And I also think, preparing students in advance for what is going to take place during the presentation. So if they know, hey, I'm going to start out with a poll and the presentation will be tailored to you and the 10 other students that are attending, they might be more likely to show up than if they just think, oh, another thing that I'm going to sit in on where somebody's going to talk to me for 30 minutes and I'll, probably play on my phone. Do you have anything to add?
I think you're spot on. I think it's just, you got to make it a little bit more fun, right? It's got to be something that because there's multiple colleges coming to do the same thing at high schools, that we have to make it fun and have to make it a little bit different. Don't be afraid to be a little bit quirky. I know that being quirky is different and that's fine, but do something that's going to be impact. That's going to leave an impact on those prospective students, saying there's just something that XYZ did that really caught my attention, right? So really, really good question. I think another good question is what are some of the best practices for communicating about hands-on programs, so film schools, engineering, that rely on the use of equipment and labs for a truly robust experience? I always lean back to video on this one. Is that video doesn't necessarily have to be just someone talking. It can be an interview talking about that, not even in a lab, but showing B-roll showing that. So I think it's really important to highlight your spaces. Even if we can't go into those spaces right now because they're inside, I think it's really, really important for you to take what you've had in the past, maybe rip some of that content down that could be used in some of the B-roll opportunities, and then redo that by using some of your current students, your alumni, and your faculty as the authentic and genuine voice. Is there anything that we can do that takes some of your equipment outside, so that when we're doing interviews and we're doing this stuff, we don't have to be wearing a mask, maybe in outside spaces? So there's a lot of different ways to do it, but right now, more than anything, even if that's part of your experience, being authentic and genuine, even if you have to go in there with no students actually working and having a student describe that out, in a different way, it's better than having nothing. So really, really good question. Let's see here. This is a really good question for you, Lauren. What are some good ways to offer value before making an ask?
Yeah, I think, why do we always have to ask them to do something right away? Can we not just send little bits of information over time to let them know that we're interested in them and that we want to, kind of create a relationship, instead of right off the bat, we purchased your name on Monday and on Wednesday, hey, I'm so-and-so, come to a virtual visit. Why can't we over a few weeks just say, this is our school, this is, our faculty, here's more about your program of interest, this is what it's like to live on campus. These are the opportunities that the city that we're in provides, kind of just hold their hand a little bit and court them over time. And then maybe say, are you interested in us? Do you want to receive, something in the mail, or, just kind of spread it out instead of immediately, asking for that, hey, come to an event sort of thing.
Yeah. I think you bring up a really good point, Lauren, is that we talked about personalization, but we also talked about differentiation. And a lot of times at the very top of the funnel, it's okay to not be super personal. As we move farther and farther down that funnel, it's important to get more personal. But at the top of the funnel, I think more than anything, it's important to be different. And so show your prospective students how you are different than your competition without saying, hey, I need you to go ahead and send in an application. Have a couple steps that happen before. And if you allow the student to just navigate and still be a stealth visitor, but have the right type of solution to capture their information because they're emotionally engaged, that leads to a better prospect. It leads to a better, someone that you can actually reach out to that's not just a name, and you're going to feel better about your list that you're creating as well, because there's actual generated interest, not just, hey, I got a name from a database. So really, really good point, Lauren. We only have one more question left. So if there's any other questions that are out there, we've got about 5 more minutes left. Lauren, do you have something?
Well, there's one that I accidentally checked off. So,
Okay.
you want me to read that? Okay.
Yep.
So is there a platform or methodology that is capturing prospective student attention more than another? Have you heard from students how they prefer to receive their information in this advanced and crowded virtual climate? What are prospective students considering rich media?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. I think, the first thing I hear, when we're talking about rich media, we're talking about some things that are engaging. A video comes to mind, any kind of virtual, it doesn't have to be live. It can be on-demand content. That is one thing to think about as well, is that we live in a world that we live on demand, right? We have Netflix, we have YouTube TV. We watch TV and whatever shows we want to when it's convenient for us. So yes, I think it's important to have some live sessions to be able to create live, one-on-one conversations. But it doesn't mean that needs to be the primary focus of what you're doing. Now, rich media can also be, I have some 360 photos, sometimes 360 video could be that. Anything that we can go farther and farther into showing, not just showing, but really feeling, would be what I would consider rich media. So it could even be just student spotlights, where you have your student ambassadors send a Zoom video or a video of their parents recording them on an iPhone, telling them their 5 favorite things about going to Georgia State, where I went. It can be that authentic. It could be, I want you to read your parents to read you these 3 series of questions, and you just send the videos in. It's okay to be extra authentic right now. That is, to me, what rich media is all about.
And I would say, to hit on the first part of the question that was just kind of asking about, what platform is capturing attention more than another, and how they prefer to receive their information. I think, when I worked in admissions marketing, every morning that I got to my desk, I pulled email analytics from the past 3 days and tracked them in a spreadsheet against what the call to action was and how many students were actually doing that thing, so that on a weekly basis, our team was assessing, what are the most effective messages that we're sending out that are truly driving action. Because it's not just about clicks and opens and form fills, it's about applications and deposits and, students who ultimately enroll. And so, obviously mail has a little bit more tricky tracking, but can you see, of the 6,000 students that we sent this piece to, how many of them completed the action within 5 days, 10 days, 30 days, and really track that information and let the data guide you to what the best initiative is. I think a lot of times, at conferences, I think people oftentimes just go based off of like a hunch or anecdotes. And I think it's really important to let the data guide you to, what your best messaging and your best channels are.
Really good stuff. Really, really good stuff. The last question, if you have any other questions, please shoot us in the Q&A, is what are schools doing differently in their virtual recruiting presentations, assuming they are virtual?
So we had a webinar series last month where we talked with a few different schools about some of the different initiatives that they had for this. And one of the big things was, a lot of schools were taking what they were doing in person and just replicating it online. So I used to go to 20 high schools, in a certain period of time, and I'm going to create those 20 high school visits online. Well, what if I go to whatever high school and I'm not available Tuesday at 6 o'clock? Why can't I just choose whenever? Why do I have to be limited to what my high school is to go to that presentation? Or why don't we do presentations by academic area of interest? So instead of just talking to everyone at one high school, we could talk to everyone who's interested in our arts program and tailor it a little bit more down, because we're no longer limited by the geography and, our physical place. So I think that was one of the biggest things was, rethinking why do we do the things that we do, and not just replicating the in-person in an online environment.